Snowmelt hissed against red-hot stones, each drop evaporating into steam that thickened the air inside the buffalo hide teepee. Neshoba sat motionless across from the fire, watching the pale-haired woman stir venison stew in the black iron pot. Her infant daughter, wrapped in threadbare blankets, gripped the woman's shawl with tiny fists, gurgling at the sparks rising through the smoke hole. The baby's eyes were the color of winter sky. Clear, penetrating, wrong. Neshoba's chest constricted. His daughter had looked at him the same way 3 winters ago, in the final moments before pneumonia stole her breath. He'd held her cooling body through the night, singing healing songs that fell on deaf ears, punishment he'd decided for the crow man he'd killed hours before in blind revenge. The spirits had withdrawn their favor. His medicine bundle now lay buried at the bottom of his possessions, wrapped in deerskin he couldn't bear to touch. He'd sworn never to heal again, never to let another child's life depend on hands he believed were cursed. "She likes you," Madeline Hugg said quietly, her Norwegian accent softening the consonants. The widow was 23, but looked older, eyes, 2 wary shoulders carrying invisible weight. "Most babies cry around strangers." Neshoba grunted noncommittally. He'd hired her 4 days ago as cook for his remote camp in Thunder Valley, practical necessity, nothing more. She needed shelter. He needed meals that didn't taste like charred leather. The arrangement suited them both. But practical arrangements didn't explain why his breath caught when the infant reached toward him, why grief surged like floodwater, threatening to drown him. Outside, February wind shrieked through the canyon. Inside, the fire crackled. Madeleine shifted closer to the flames, shielding her daughter from a log that popped and sprayed embers. Neshoba moved instinctively, placing his body between the door flap, and them both blocking the knife-edge draft. Their shoulders touched. Neither pulled away. The rifle shot exploded the silence. Buffalo hide erupted inward where the bullet punched through sinew, stitching, tearing. Dust plumed. The baby's screams split the air, high, terrified, pure survival instinct. Neshoba rolled sideways, one arm sweeping the iron pot from the fire, the other catching Madeleine's wrist and yanking her down. Hot stew splashed across packed earth. Astrid wailed against her mother's chest. "Down! Stay down!" His voice carried 30 winters of authority. He crawled to the door flap, fingers finding the Spencer carbine propped beside it. The metal was ice-cold, familiar as his own heartbeat. He slithered outside on his belly, snow melting against his buckskin leggings. His breath misted white. Boot prints led away from the teepee, one dragging slightly. The gait hurried but controlled. Someone who knew how to move fast through hostile territory. Not a drunk drifter stumbling through darkness. Someone testing his defenses, measuring how close they could press before he retaliated. Neshoba circled the camp twice. Spencer ready, every sense straining. The horse corral stood undisturbed. The cache pit remained sealed. Just the single shot warning or intimidation, impossible to tell which. When he ducked back inside, Madeleine held a skinning knife in her free hand blade, catching firelight. Her daughter had quieted to hiccuping sobs. The widow's face showed no hysteria, just cold calculation. "They'll return," she stated. Neshoba nodded slowly, banking the fire to reduce their visibility. "Tomorrow we track them. Tonight we watch." "We?" Her pale eyebrows rose. "You cook too well to lose to a stray bullet." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost humor something he'd thought died with his daughter. Madeleine's lips curved fractionally. "Then I suppose I should keep practicing." The moment felt strange, almost normal, as if grief and danger hadn't been constants for so long that normalcy had become foreign territory. Winter 1881 had scoured the Great Plains to exposed bone. Neshoba ran horses for freight outfits when they paid fairly, scouted for the Indian Agency, when they needed someone who could read weather and terrain, like most men read newspapers. But mostly he kept to Thunder Valley. The Box Canyon red rock walls, willow thickets, a spring-fed creek that never froze completely, was his sanctuary. Half a day's hard ride from the trading post at Crow's Landing, far enough from civilization's judgments. The stone lodged permanently beneath his ribs had a name grief so profound it had hollowed him out. His daughter, 6 months old when she died, had taken her last rattling breath while he sang healing songs, begged spirits to intervene. The night before her death, he'd killed a crow raider in revenge for stolen horses. Violence and death intertwined. The spirits had punished his rage by taking what mattered most. He'd wrapped his medicine bundle in deerskin and buried it with his daughter's cradleboard. Healing required clean hands and pure intent. His hands were stained with blood. His intent had shattered. Madeline Haug carried her own stone. 23-year-old Norwegian immigrant widow of a man whose family had tried to steal her infant daughter under pretense of proper Christian raising. The truth was simpler, uglier. Her late husband's Minnesota farm and savings account represented enough money to fight over. If they controlled the child, they controlled the inheritance. She'd fled west by freight wagon, cooking for passage, changing her name at every stop, staying one town ahead of whatever letters or lawmen they might send. She was practical in ways Neshoba respected immediately. Her hands bore rope scars from hauling supplies. She could split kindling with 6 clean strikes and render every scrap of a rabbit meat for stew bones, for broth hide, for patching. She wasted nothing, spoke little about her past, moved with the efficient economy of someone who'd learned that wasted motion meant wasted energy, meant death. Dawn broke sharp and cold. Neshoba saddled his buckskin gelding while Madeline bundled Astrid in furs. Gray Otter appeared from the creek willows, Neshoba's nephew somewhere between 15 and 18 winters records for Lakota births being imprecise and irrelevant to people who counted age by winters survived rather than calendar dates. Found more tracks. The young man's breath steamed, leading to dead cattle by the valley mouth. They rode together, horses blowing vapor in frigid air. The cattle 9 head bearing Harlan Pike's brand lay in a rough circle near where Thunder Valley's creek emptied into the main drainage. Blood had frozen into dark ice beneath slit throats. Neshoba crouched beside the nearest carcass, examining the wound. Too clean, too precise. The cut angled upward like a butcher's practiced strike, not the tearing ragged edges wolves left. He ran his finger along the wound's margin and sniffed faint chemical tang underneath copper blood. Gray Otter circled the site reading sign. 4 horses. Boot prints with hobnails, not moccasins. And this. He held up a small glass vial, residue clinging inside. Madeleine dismounted, studying the cattle with a butcher's eye. Arsenic. I've seen rats poisoned in Minnesota. This much would drop a cow in minutes. Someone drugged them, then cut throats to make it look savage. Neshoba straightened, scanning the horizon. Someone who wants Pike blaming me. They were still examining evidence when Deputy Yates arrived with 3 of Pike's riders. Yates was 40-something, thick-necked, with a tin star pinned to his canvas coat and a Colt revolver riding high on his hip. His eyes swept the dead cattle, then fixed on Neshoba with predetermined judgment. You want to explain this? I didn't kill them. Pike says otherwise. Says you've been threatening his stock, trying to drive him from grazing rights. Pike's lying. Neshoba kept his voice level. Walk the ground, read what's actually there. I'll search your camp first. Neshoba blocked the path toward his teepee. You need a warrant. Don't need warrants for Indian camps. Yates stepped closer, hand drifting toward his revolver. Gray Otter materialized beside his uncle. Winchester held casually, but unmistakably ready. The mathematics shifted 3 of Pike's men all armed against 2 Lakota warriors and a widow with a baby. Poor odds for everyone. Madeline moved between Yates and the teepee door flap, her body angled to protect Astrid. One of Pike's riders, a young hothead named Cobb, smirked and stepped forward. His forearm clipped the cradle board, leaning against the teepee frame. The board toppled. Astrid shrieked. Neshoba's fist came up fast, stopping an inch from Yates's jaw. His knuckles trembled with restrained violence. The deputy's hand closed on his revolver grip. "You want truth?" Neshoba's voice dropped to something colder than the February wind. "Walk the ground." Something in his absolute stillness made Yates hesitate. Maybe he recognized a man who'd killed before and would again if pushed. Maybe he just wanted to avoid paperwork. Either way, he followed Neshoba to the cattle. Gray Otter had marked boot prints with sticks, clear hobnail pattern, one boot dragging slightly. The vial with its chemical residue. The 2 clean cuts. Evidence methodically arranged for someone willing to see it. Poison first, cuts after. Neshoba handed Yates the vial. "Staged to look like Indian butchery. Someone wants you angry enough to clear me out of this valley." Yates examined the vial, sniffed it, frowned. The tracks told an undeniable story, riders arriving after dark, systematic poisoning, theatrical throat-cutting, hasty departure. Nothing suggested Lakota involvement. "This doesn't clear you," Yates said finally. "But I'll talk to Pike and to Doc Whitfield about this vial." After they left, Neshoba returned to find Madeline rocking Astrid, humming a Norwegian lullaby. Her hands shook slightly. The cradle board lay cracked where it had fallen. "I'll fix this." Neshoba fetched his awl and sinew thread, kneeling to repair the split frame. Madeline watched him work with fingers that wouldn't stop smoothing her daughter's fine hair. "What does Pike want? Water, grass? Thunder Valley's the best winter range for 50 miles. Neshoba tied off a stitch with practiced efficiency. "Maybe something else, too." He glanced at Astrid. The baby had stopped crying, watching him with those 2 familiar sky-colored eyes. For a heartbeat, grief crushed his chest so completely he couldn't draw breath. Then Madeline's hand touched his shoulder light as a bird landing, grounding as an anchor. "Thank you," she said softly, "for not hitting him. Would have made things worse." "I know, but still." Her hand lingered, warmth seeping through buckskin. "Thank you." That night, Neshoba positioned himself between the fire and the door flap, Spencer across his knees. Madeline mended torn leggings by firelight needle, moving in hypnotic rhythm. Outside, wind howled. Inside, silence felt less like isolation, more like companionship neither had experienced in too long. When Astrid fussed, Neshoba handed Madeline dried elk meat to chew soft for the baby. Their fingers brushed. Both looked away quickly, but something fundamental had shifted, imperceptible as wind changing direction, but undeniably present. "I'll check." Amos Whitfield's office occupied 2 rooms in Crow's Landing, and the physician himself, 60-something, with gray beard and arthritis-gnarled hands that moved with surprising gentleness. He'd reset Neshoba's frostbitten fingers the previous winter, shown genuine interest in herbal remedies most white doctors dismissed as primitive superstition. "Arsenic." Whitfield examined the vial through wire-rimmed spectacles. "I sold this batch to Burke Mallory last month. He claimed rats in his storeroom at the trading post. Enough to poison 9 cattle. Enough for 30. Whitfield pulled a ledger from his shelf, thumbing through receipts. "And Pike bought arsenic 3 weeks ago. Said it was for wolves. Between them, there's enough poison to kill every head in the territory." Neshoba's jaw tightened. Why would Pike poison his own stock? To blame someone? Get the agency stirred up? Maybe claim your valley as recompense for his losses. Whitfield's shrewd eyes met Neshoba's. Met. You need proof you didn't do it. Working on that. The schoolhouse doubled as meeting hall and occasional courthouse. Eliza Hart was erasing slate boards when Neshoba entered, her dark skirt chalk dusty. 25 years old, sharp-minded, she ran evening lessons for ranch hands and Lakota children learning English and arithmetic. She also kept legal pamphlets on guardianship, and homestead law knowledge was power, she'd told Neshoba once, especially for people the law was designed to keep powerless. Someone shot at my camp last night, Neshoba said without preamble. Eliza set down her eraser. Pike, maybe his men, maybe someone else. He pulled the vial from his coat. Whitfield says this came from Burke's stock. Pike's been spreading rumors about me threatening his cattle. He's also been asking about your cook. Eliza pulled a newspaper clipping from her desk. Minneapolis Tribune, 2 months old. Missing woman, Norwegian descent, traveling with infant. Suspected of abandoning family obligations. The description matched Madeline perfectly. Neshoba folded the clipping carefully. If Pike's looking for her, he'll use you to get to her, or use her to get your valley. Eliza handed him a legal pamphlet. Guardianship laws favor male relatives. If Pike can prove kinship to that baby, he can claim custody and force the mother out legally. Then you're alone against his lawyers and money. Neshoba rode back to Thunder Valley with Gray Otter, both silent, until they reached the canyon rim. She's hiding from something, Gray Otter observed, not quite a question. Everyone's hiding from something. You like her. Definitely not a question this time. Neshoba shot his nephew a warning look. She cooks well. Uncle, I'm young, not stupid. Gray Otter grinned. You watch her like she might disappear, and she watches you like she's trying to figure out if you're safe or dangerous. Both, probably. Good. Safe men don't survive out here. But dangerous men who choose safety, that's different. The young man's grin faded. Just don't let grief make you stupid. She's good for you. The baby, too. They make you remember you're alive. They rode down into the valley in silence, but Gray Otter's words lingered like smoke. Pike arrived at Thunder Valley just after noon, 10 men flanking him in precise formation. He sat his horse like a man who'd learned to ride in finishing schools rather than breaking colts on open-range back-straight reins, held just so everything calculated for effect. 50-something, with silver-threading dark hair and eyes that assessed everything in terms of profit and loss. He wore a wool coat tailored in Denver boots, polished despite trail dust. Money announced itself in ways beyond coins, in quality leather custom spurs, the casual confidence of someone who'd never worried about next winter's supplies. His gaze swept Neshoba's camp with theatrical disapproval, lingering on the patched teepee, the modest horse corral, the drying meat racks. Then, Madeleine emerged with Astrid bundled against her chest. Pike went absolutely still. His eyes locked on the baby's face with recognition, so naked it answered questions Neshoba hadn't known to ask. You got papers for that child? Pike's voice carried practiced authority. Madeleine's arms tightened protectively. She's mine. I asked about papers. Birth certificate, marriage license proving legal parentage. I'm her mother. That's all the proof I need. Law disagrees, ma'am. Pike dismounted with calculated slowness. Those eyes, I've seen them before. On my son Rowan before he died in Minnesota. Before a certain Norwegian girl vanished with his child. The words detonated like buried explosives. Madeleine's face drained white. Neshoba moved to her side instinctively, Gray Otter materializing with his Winchester. Pike's men fanned out hands near holstered weapons. The valley held its breath. My son wrote before he died. Pike continued voice-dropping to conversational tones somehow more menacing than shouting. Said he'd married a Norwegian girl. Then he died in a stampede and she vanished with my granddaughter. He pointed at Astrid. That child. Your son forced himself on me. Madeline's voice cracked but steadied. There was no marriage. Just violence I couldn't stop because he was my employer and I had no rights. Heavy accusation against a dead man. Pike's expression remained neutral. Either way, the child's blood is Pike blood. I've got lawyers in Kansas City who'll confirm my rights as grandfather. Law favors male relatives, especially ones with property and standing. Not foreign widows with no husband, no money living in Indian camps. He was right. Everyone knew it. Laws in 1881 were written to favor men with resources over women with nothing. I'm setting up camp at the valley mouth, Pike announced. For the child's protection, you understand. Can't have her exposed to violence, what with cattle being slaughtered and all. His eyes flicked to Neshoba. Once I secure proper custody through legal channels, we'll relocate her somewhere civilized. Somewhere she can be raised properly. You're not taking her. Madeline barely whispered it. That's not your decision anymore, ma'am. Frontier's dangerous for women alone. Accidents happen. Disease. Wild animals. Would be tragic if something happened before the courts ruled. The threat hung explicit despite pleasant delivery. Neshoba's hand closed on his knife hilt. You're threatening her. I'm stating facts. This is my valley now. I'm claiming it as recompense for cattle losses. You'll vacate within the week, or I'll have the agency remove you. Pike remounted. Welcome to how the law actually works. His riders withdrew to the valley mouth, establishing camp canvas tents, fire rings, supply wagons. A proper siege. That night, violence came without warning. Neshoba was checking horses when he heard fabric tear. He spun, saw the teepee's support ropes, severed canvas, collapsing inward. The fire ring's coals rolled across the floor directly toward the cradle board where Astrid slept. He lunged through the door flap forearms, taking blistering heat as he caught the falling center pole and shoved it upright. Hot embers scattered. He grabbed a wet buffalo hide and threw it over spreading flames, smothering them before they reached the baby. Outside, Gray Otter's shout echoed. Neshoba ran into darkness, knife ready. He found his nephew wrestling a shadow figure at the creek. The figure broke free and splashed across the water, disappearing into willows. Gray Otter held up torn fabric, a sleeve cuff with distinctive pattern. Burke Mallory's custom-ordered shirts from Kansas City. Back at the teepee, Dr. Whitfield had arrived. He must have ridden through the night. His face was grim as he examined Neshoba's forearms. The burns were shallow, but painful, already blistering, angry red. Those cuts on the cattle. Whitfield said, applying salve. They're made with a butcher's awl. Same tool used for bleeding hides. Burke worked slaughterhouses before he bought the trading post. Can you prove it? Madeline asked, her voice still shaking from the fire. I can testify about the arsenic sales, about Burke's purchase history. Whitfield wrapped Neshoba's arms with clean bandages. It might raise doubt. Eliza Hart had ridden with Whitfield carrying legal documents. She'd been copying affidavits from ranchers about cattle locations, creating a timeline that showed every attack happened near Thunder Valley, always at night, always without witnesses. Pike's building a case, Eliza explained. Not just against Neshoba, against you too, Madeline. He's claiming you're providing an unfit environment for a white child. Cohabitation outside marriage, lack of proper supervision, exposure to savage influences. She used the ugly words clinically. He's going for full custody. Madeline's hands trembled as she tore strips from her only good dress, faded blue cotton she'd been saving to rebind Neshoba's arms, where blood seeped through Whitfield's bandages. You need that dress. Nashoba protested weakly. You need your hands more. Her voice steadied with purpose. I can sew another dress. You can't grow new hands. Their eyes locked, his breath shallow from pain, hers uneven from fear and something deeper. The space between them felt charged, not romance yet, but recognition of fundamental need. They were stronger together than apart. We proved Pike's behind the attacks, Nashoba said finally. Show he's the real danger. How? Madeline tied off the bandage with careful precision. By catching whoever's doing his work. They set a trap that night, a decoy bundle shaped like a sleeping figure near the teepee, the ground deliberately wetted so footprints would show. Nashoba, Gray Otter, and Madeline concealed themselves in the willows, with clear sight lines and weapons ready. Hours crawled past. Cold seeped through buckskin and wool. Astrid slept bundled against Madeline's chest, silent, as if she understood stealth meant survival. Nashoba crouched close enough that their shoulders touched, sharing warmth. When Madeleine shivered, he shifted nearer without comment. She leaned into his heat gratefully, and neither acknowledged the intimacy because acknowledging made it real, made it vulnerable. Near dawn, a figure approached the decoy. He moved carefully, checking for watchers before raising a heavy club. Nash Oba whistled sharp, piercing. Gray Otter lit a pine torch. The figure spun, illuminated. Calder Briggs, one of Pike's hired men, young rustler with a stutter and nervous eyes. He dropped the club and bolted. Gray Otter had already circled behind. They caught Briggs at the creek, pressing him into cold mud. Pete Pike's foreman pays Burke to stage the raids. Briggs stammered with a knife pressed to his throat, not cutting, just promising. I drug the cattle, Burke cuts them. Makes it look like savages. Why? Nashoba demanded. Valley's worth a fortune if Pike gets it. Water rights, grass trail access. Burke gets paid when it's done. Briggs's eyes were white-rimmed with terror. I didn't sign on for hurting women and babies. Swear to that. You just tried to club someone in their sleep. Thought it was you, not the woman. Briggs's voice cracked. Pike's going crazy, says the widow's making him look weak. Burke's scared Pike'll cut him loose, so he's pushing her harder. They dragged Briggs to Whitfield's office, where the physician agreed to keep him under medical quarantine, safer than jail, where Pike's money could reach. Eliza began drafting affidavits with Briggs's testimony. But Pike moved faster than expected. That afternoon, he rode into Thunder Valley with Deputy Yates and 2 lawyers from Kansas City, men in pressed suits that looked absurd against rough frontier backdrop. Got a court order, Yates announced, unfolding official-looking papers. Child custody inquiry. Judge Renfrow wants to see the baby assess living conditions. Tomorrow at Crow's Landing. You don't show judgment defaults to Pike. After they left, Madeline sat clutching Astrid, her face bone white. He's going to take her. The judge will see me living in a teepee with a Lakota man, no husband, no property, and he'll give her to Pike. Not if we prove Pike's behind the attacks. Nashoba knelt in front of her. We've got Briggs's testimony, Whitfield's ledgers, physical evidence. One criminal's word against a wealthy rancher. Her voice carried defeat. We've got more than that. He pulled out the arsenic vials, the torn fabric, the timeline Eliza had compiled. We've got truth. Sometimes that matters. But truth felt fragile against Pike's money and influence. That night, as Madeline cooked what might be their last meal together, Nashoba taught her Lakota words, greetings, basic phrases, the language of his people. She repeated carefully, accent-mangling pronunciation. He corrected gently his hand, guiding hers through accompanying gestures. When she finally got a phrase right, he smiled, rare expression that transformed his weathered face. into something almost tender. "You're a good teacher," she said. "You're a patient student." His hand remained over hers, warmth against warmth. Astrid reached up and grabbed both their fingers simultaneously, pulling their hands together. They looked at the baby, then at each other. Something passed between them, unspoken acknowledgement that this fragile unit mattered more than individual survival. Not love yet, but the foundation of it built from shared danger and mutual need. The custody hearing filled the schoolhouse-turned-courthouse with tension thick enough to choke on. Judge Renfrow presided, territorial appointee, formal and distant, caring more about legal precedent than frontier justice. Pike arrived with his Kansas City lawyers, Cordell the lead attorney, all slicked hair and Boston accent. Deputy Yates stood guard, hand resting on his revolver. The small room packed quickly, ranchers, traders, Lakota observers, townspeople drawn by scandal. Madeleine entered carrying Astrid Nashoba at her side. She wore her repaired blue dress, mended with Lakota beadwork where fabric had been torn for bandages. Her pale hair was braided Norwegian style. She looked young, poor, utterly outmatched. Cordell presented Pike's case with surgical precision. Mr. Harlan Pike seeks guardianship of his granddaughter, born of his deceased son Rowan's union with the respondent. The child currently resides in unsuitable conditions, specifically an Indian encampment, lacking proper shelter, sanitation, or moral supervision. Furthermore, Miss Hogg has demonstrated questionable judgment by cohabiting with a Lakota warrior outside legal marriage, exposing a white child to savage influences. The child's welfare demands immediate removal to proper Christian household under her blood grandfather's guidance. Character assassination, dressed as concern. Madeleine's hands shook. Nashoba remained motionless, but his jaw clenched so tight it ached. Eliza Hart stood to present their defense. She introduced Whitfield's arsenic ledgers, showing Pike's purchase history, the torn fabric matching Burke's clothing. She called Calder Briggs to testify. Calder stammered through his statement Pike's foreman paying him and Burke to poison cattle stage raids framed Nashoba. Cordell cross-examined ruthlessly, attacking Calder's criminal record, suggesting coercion, implying he'd say anything to avoid jail. When Eliza tried introducing Burke Mallory as witness, Yates revealed Burke had disappeared that morning, likely fled the territory. Without his testimony, the conspiracy claims looked weak. Pike's lawyers pivoted to personal attacks, calling a traitor who'd passed through Thunder Valley. He claimed to see inappropriate intimacy between Nashoba and Madeleine. "Did you observe the defendant and the Indian sharing sleeping quarters?" "Same teepee, yes, sir." "And the child was present during this cohabitation?" "Yes, sir." It didn't matter that single-room dwellings were standard frontier accommodation. The implication was clear: immoral conditions, unfit, mother, endangered child. Judge Renfrow's expression hardened. "Miss Hogg, you admit to residing in an Indian camp without legal marriage or proper chaperonage?" Madeleine stood, Astrid clutched to her chest. "I admit to residing with a man who saved my life when white civilization offered nothing but violence and theft." "Yes, Your Honor, and I'd make the same choice again." "That attitude may cost you custody." "Then custody isn't about protection, it's about control." Cordell smiled thinly. "Your Honor, the respondent's defiance demonstrates exactly why this child needs proper guardianship. Mr. Pike offers stability, education, Christian values. Mr. Pike offers nothing but land theft and lies." Eliza interrupted. She pulled out an envelope, hands shaking slightly. "I submit Exhibit D correspondence from Rowan Pike to his father, dated March 1879, discovered among the deceased's effects." She read it aloud. Every word landed like physical blows. Rowan's elegant handwriting confessed to forcing himself on Madeleine, expressing vague regret, but insisting it was his right as her employer. He asked his father for money to resolve the situation. Most damning. If there's a child, I want no part of it. You always said heirs should be legitimate, not bastards born from hired help. The courtroom erupted. Pike's face went white, then crimson. That letter is a forgery. It's your son's handwriting, Eliza countered. We have bank documents with matching signatures for comparison. It's out of context. It's a confession of rape and rejection of paternity. It destroys your claim of legitimate kinship and proves you've been planning this custody seizure for years using cattle attacks to force a widow into submission. Judge Renfrow examined the letter carefully, comparing signatures. His expression shifted from skeptical to thoughtful. Mr. Pike, this document raises serious questions. The door burst open. Gray Otter stumbled in, bleeding from a head wound, eyes wild. Fire, Thunder Valley's burning. Everyone rushed outside. To the west, smoke rose in a dark column too large to be controlled, burning too sudden to be accidental. Pike's face showed genuine shock. I didn't order. But someone had. With everyone at the hearing, Thunder Valley was defenseless. Neshoba was already running for his horse. Madeline thrust Astrid into Eliza's arms and followed. Gray Otters swayed but mounted. They rode hard hooves, pounding frozen road. As they approached the valley, destruction's scope became horrifying. Multiple fires, teepee cache pit corral, strategically set with accelerant. But the real target was deeper, the spring that fed the creek. Someone had used explosives, collapsing the entrance with tons of rock and timber. Without water, Thunder Valley was worthless. Neshoba stood at the rockfall face carved from stone. Madeleine touched his arm gently. Who benefits from destroying what Pike wanted to steal? Gray Otter found tracks leading from the blast site, boots with hobnail heels, different wear pattern than Burke's. Fresher, military issue, Deputy Yates's boots. But Yates had been at the hearing. Unless he'd stepped out briefly, Madeline remembered him leaving, claiming nature's call. Enough time to signal someone waiting outside town. The revelation crashed over them. Pike hadn't ordered this. Yates had acted independently or on someone else's orders entirely. They returned to Crow's Landing to find chaos. Judge Renfrow had postponed his ruling pending fire investigation. Pike was arguing with his lawyers. Eliza held crying Astrid, trying to soothe her. Neshoba pulled Dr. Whitfield aside. Who else benefits if Thunder Valley's destroyed? Whitfield's eyes widened. The railroad? Everything clicked. The railroad company had been surveying Black Hills routes for months, seeking water sources and easy grades. Thunder Valley's spring and gentle approach made it ideal for a station stop, but only if clear of competing claims. Pike had been trying to seize the valley legally. But someone with deeper pockets had decided to destroy it instead, eliminating both Pike's ambitions and Neshoba's claim simultaneously. Yates has been on railroad payroll for months, Whitfield said grimly. I've seen him meeting with survey crews. The twist was complete. Pike had been a distraction while the real threat operated in shadow. The cattle killings, custody battle, Burke's involvement, all genuine conflicts, but exploited to mask the railroad's objective. And now that objective was achieved. Thunder Valley was dead. Except the infant with sky-colored eyes began showing symptoms that night. Raspy breathing, pale lips, burning fever. Pneumonia, just like Neshoba's daughter 3 years ago. History repeating with cruel precision, offering one choice: walk away from healing and watch another child die, or break his vow and try to save her. Please. Madeline held Astrid's fevered body, tears streaming. If there's anything you know, anything at all. Neshoba stared at the baby's glazed eyes, hearing his daughter's final rattling breaths. He'd sworn he was unfit to heal, that his violence had cursed him. But maybe that was just fear, dressed as punishment. "Get Whitfield," he told Grey Otter. "Tell him to bring willow bark bear grease clean cloths." Then he rolled up his sleeves and began building a sweat lodge. The structure was makeshift bent willows covered with wet canvas built in Whitfield's barn since Thunder Valley's smoke made breathing difficult. Nashoba heated rocks until they glowed, carried them inside with wooden tongs. Steam billowed when he poured water infused with willow bark. "Tilt her head back," he instructed Madeline. "Keep the airway open. Count her breaths too fast or too slow. Tell me immediately." He worked with focused intensity, alternating steam treatments with careful sponging of fevered skin. He mixed bear grease with herbs, applying it to Astrid's chest and back, massaging gently to ease congested lungs. No chants, no prayers, just practiced technique. Hours passed, the baby's breathing roughened into wet, rattling gasps. Madeline went white. "She's drowning. She's fighting." Nashoba adjusted Astrid's position. "Talk to her. Let her hear your voice." Madeline pleaded in Norwegian and English, mixed together switching languages in desperation. "Don't leave me, lille vennen min. Please, you're everything I have." Nashoba met her eyes across the steam. Not everything. Through the night, they traded, holding Astrid's shoulders, touching in the small space. When Madeline's arms shook from exhaustion, Nashoba took over. When his burned forearms cramped, she relieved him. Their foreheads met once in the darkness, both leaning over the baby breaths, mingling. "Why didn't you save your daughter this way?" Madeleine whispered. Long silence. "I tried. Did everything I knew. She died in my arms while I sang healing songs." His voice was flat. "I thought my violence, the man I killed, had cursed me, that spirits withdrew their favor. Do you still believe that?" "I don't know. But if I don't try now, I'll never forgive myself." Near dawn, Astrid's breathing shifted. The wet rattle eased. Her color improved from deathly pale to flushed pink. When Madeline offered broth-soaked cloth, the baby sucked weakly. Whitfield checked her carefully. "Fever's breaking. Lungs clearing. Whatever you're doing, continue." Relief crashed through them. Madeleine sagged against Nashoba, and he caught her automatically, arms circling her and Astrid both. They stayed that way, a family in configuration, if not yet name. But Pike chose that moment for his final strike. He arrived with Yates' lawyers and a freshly issued court order. Judge Renfrew, influenced by chaos and Pike's insistence on immediate action, had granted emergency temporary custody. "Hand over the child," Pike demanded. "She's sick." Madeline's voice cracked. "She's fighting pneumonia. Then she needs proper hospital care, not Indian witchcraft." Pike's tone allowed no argument. "Deputy, enforce the order." Yates stepped forward, hand on his revolver. Nashoba rose slowly, positioning himself between the deputy and Madeleine. His burned arms throbbed, but he ignored the pain eyes promising violence if pushed. "You want to fight a legal order?" Yates asked quietly. "Give me reason to shoot." "There's new evidence." Eliza's voice cut through tension. She stood in the doorway holding thick envelope. "Judge Renfrew must see this before any custody transfer." The order's signed. "The order's based on incomplete information." Eliza pulled out documents, bank drafts, receipts, surveyor testimony. "This proves Deputy Yates has been on railroad payroll for 6 months, hired specifically to clear Thunder Valley by any means. He set the explosives, coordinated with Burke to stage cattle killings, fed information to Pike while secretly working against him." Yates's face went white. "That's a lie. It's documented." Eliza handed papers to Pike. You've been played. The railroad used your custody claim as cover for their land grab. Pike read silently, expression darkening. He saw immediately how he'd been manipulated. You made me look like a fool, he said to Yates' voice dangerously quiet. I was following orders, not mine. Pike turned to his lawyers. Withdraw the custody petition, immediately. Sir, if we withdraw? I said withdraw it. I won't be anyone's pawn. He looked at Madeline with something approaching respect. The child's yours. Stay away from my property, and we're done. He mounted and rode away, lawyers scrambling to follow. But Yates wasn't finished. Cornered and exposed, he drew his revolver. Nobody's taking me. Neshoba moved despite burned arms and exhaustion knocking Yates's gun hand aside. The revolver discharged into the barn roof. Gray Otter tackled Yates from behind. They crashed down together. When dust settled, Yates was unconscious, and Neshoba's forearms bled from reopened blisters. Whitfield muttered about stubborn warriors while rewrapping burns. 3 days later, another explosion, this one metaphorical. Burke Mallory sent word from his hideout he'd trade information for safe passage. Desperate cornered, he'd become unpredictable. He took Astrid. Calder Briggs gasped, bursting into town at dawn. Says he'll trade her for money and a head start west. He's at Black Gull Mine. Madeline's scream was raw. Neshoba was moving before conscious thought, checking his Spencer-filling ammunition pouches. Gray Otter saddled horses with furious efficiency. They rode hard through spring-thaw creeks, swollen to torrents. The first obstacle hit at a ford normally ankle-deep, now chest-high on a horse churning with snowmelt and debris. We have to cross, Madeline said desperately. Carefully, or we die and she's lost anyway. Neshoba lashed rope around his waist, tied the other end to his saddle horn. Gray Otter anchored downstream. He urged his horse into water. The animal balked, eyes rolling. The current hit like a physical blow, shoving them sideways. Debris rushed past logs, branches, a dead coyote. Halfway across submerged root, caught Neshoba's stirrup. He twisted, trying to free his boot. The horse staggered. Neshoba hit the water. The current took him immediately, rope going taut, dragging the horse. He surfaced gasping, fighting the current, grabbing a passing log to angle toward the far bank. Madeleine galloped downstream where the creek widened and slowed, riding into shallows, extending a long branch. Neshoba caught it. She pulled arms, burning horse backing up to haul him through shallows until he could stand. I said, stay behind me. He managed between coughs. You were drowning. He grasped her hand, briefly gratitude connection, then remounted and helped her and Gray Otter cross using his rope and knowledge of current patterns. They lost 20 minutes, arrived soaked and bruised, but alive. The second obstacle hit without warning. Lightning struck dry grass on the hillside above Black Gull Mine. Fire spread fast, wind-driven, racing downslope toward the mine entrance, where Burke held Astrid. Burke's trapped, Gray Otter said, reading the landscape. If fire reaches the entrance, he's dead, and so is Astrid. Neshoba made an impossible decision. We backfire. Backfiring, deliberately burning ground ahead to rob Wildfire of fuel required precision and nerve. Done wrong, it trapped them in flames. Done right, it created a safe corridor. They used blankets soaked in canteen water, dragging them across grass to create a fire line. Gray Otter struck sparks, igniting grass ahead of the wildfire. The backfire crept upslope, slowly controlled, consuming fuel before the main blaze arrived. Smoke choked them. Neshoba's eyes streamed. Madeleine wrapped wet cloth over her nose and mouth, coughing with each breath. They worked in desperate synchronization, stamping out flames that jumped the line, maintaining the narrow corridor. Calder Briggs emerged from smoke, face blackened. "I'll hold the line. You get the baby?" "Why help?" Madeline demanded. "Because I'm a rustler and coward, but not a child killer." Calder grabbed a blanket and beat back flames. "Go!" The backfire bought minutes. The main wildfire hit the burned strip and slowed. Nashoba, Madeleine, and Gray Otter sprinted for the mine entrance, a timber-braced hole in the hillside, partially collapsed from neglect. Inside, darkness swallowed them. Mine tunnels branched multiple directions, shored by rotting beams groaning under the mountain's weight. Water dripped deeper in spring runoff, seeping through cracks. Nashoba lit a candle stub. The flame guttered in faint air currents. "Stay close. Watch for bad air." They moved through the main tunnel boots, splashing ankle-deep water. Gray Otter marked their path with chalk. Burke's voice echoed from deeper, "That you, Nashoba, come for the bastard child." Nashoba didn't respond, pacing forward, carefully testing each timber before trusting weight to it. Madeline followed so close, her breath warmed his neck. They found Burke at a cross-cut junction defensible position where two tunnels intersected. He held Astrid in one arm, revolver in the other. The baby whimpered, but looked unharmed, though terrified. "Here's the deal," Burke said, voice cracking with desperation. "Let me walk out with a horse and supplies. I leave the baby at the valley mouth." "No deal." Nashoba set the candle down carefully. "Hand her over, or what you'll shoot risk hitting her." Burke's laugh was bitter. "I've got nothing. The railroad cut me loose. Pike wants me dead. This baby's my only card." "You're right," Madeline said suddenly, stepping around Nashoba. "You have nothing. But that means you have nothing to lose by doing one decent thing before you run." Burke stared at her. "Decent things don't keep you alive." "No, but they let you live with yourself." Madeline's voice softened. "I know desperation, what it's like when the world's crushing you and there's no way out except hurting others. I ran from Minnesota because men wanted to steal my daughter. I understand. This isn't the same. It's exactly the same. You're hurting a baby because you're scared. But Burke, she's 8 months old. She didn't betray you. The railroad did. Pike did. Yates did. She's innocent." Burke's gun hand wavered. Astrid whimpered again, and something in his face cracked. "I never wanted to be the kind of man who'd hurt kids." "Then don't be." Madeline extended her hands. "Give her to me. Take a horse. We won't follow for an hour, I swear it." The moment balanced on a knife edge. Burke looked at the baby, then at Madeline's desperate face, then at Nashoba's watchful stance. "Blast it all," Burke muttered, lowering the revolver. The timber above groaned. Water had rotted supports all winter. Wildfire heat expanded rock's shifting weight. A support beam cracked like a gunshot. Burke jerked reflexively. The revolver discharged. The bullet struck rock near Nashoba's head, ricocheting wildly once, twice, 3 times in the confined space, each ricochet screaming past their heads like angry hornets. Everyone dropped. The ceiling beam split. Tons of rock and timber crashed down, separating Burke from the others. Dust billowed, choking thick. The candle died. In sudden darkness, Astrid's wail was the only sound. "Madeleine." Nashoba's voice cut through chaos. "I'm here, I can't see." He fumbled for flint-struck sparks until the candle relit. The tunnel had partially collapsed. A massive beam pinned Burke's leg, trapping him under rubble. He dropped both gun and baby. Astrid lay on the tunnel floor, wailing but moving alive, apparently uninjured. Madeline lunged, scooping her up, checking frantically. "She's okay. She's okay." Burke groaned, trapped under the beam. His leg twisted unnaturally. "I can't move." Water flooded in faster. The collapse had opened new cracks. It rose from ankle-deep to knee-deep in seconds. Nashoba assessed with brutal practicality. "Move. Now." "What about him?" Madeline looked at Burke. "He drowns if we don't get him out." Nashoba handed her rope. "Tie Astrid to your chest. Keep hands free." She obeyed, lashing the baby securely. Astrid's cries echoed high and terrified. Nashoba and Gray Otter examined the beam. 300 pounds of solid timber partially shattered. Moving it required leverage and strength. "Leave me," Burke said through gritted teeth. "Save yourselves." "Shut up." Nashoba wedged his knife under the beam as fulcrum. Gray Otter on 3. Lift. They heaved. The beam shifted an inch. Burke screamed as broken bones scraped. Water rose to their thighs, cold enough to steal breath. Again. Nashoba's burned forearms split open, blood mixing with water. He ignored pain and lifted. Gray Otter strained beside him, young muscles shaking. The beam rose another inch. Burke dragged himself free, leg trailing. Madeleine grabbed his collar and hauled toward the tunnel exit. The mine groaned. More timbers cracked. Water surged in a sudden rush as another section collapsed upstream, knocking them off their feet. Nashoba caught Madeleine, steadying her. Gray Otter grabbed Burke before current swept him away. They scrambled through waist-deep water toward the entrance. The ceiling sagged ominously. Supports snapped like dry twigs. A crossbeam fell directly in their path. Madeleine saw it coming and threw herself sideways, shielding Astrid with her body. The beam missed by inches. Another beam creaked above them, this one directly over where Madeleine crouched. Nashoba saw it start to fall, saw the physics of collapse, had maybe 1 second to react. He dove, covering Madeleine and Astrid both with his body. The beam struck his back, glancing blow, not full force, but enough to drive breath from his lungs and send lightning pain through his spine. "Nashoba!" Madeleine's scream was raw. "Move," he gasped. "I'm fine. Move." He wasn't fine, but they had no time. Gray Otter pulled Burke. Nashoba and Madeleine stumbled forward together, her supporting him now, their roles reversed. More beams fell. Water rose. Smoke from the wildfire began seeping in, adding suffocation to drowning. Debris choked narrow passages, broken timber, fallen rock. Gray Otter found a side passage partially clear. This way. They diverted, crawling through a space barely wide enough for shoulders. Water flowed here too, but shallower. The passage angled upward, emergency ventilation shaft maybe, or exploratory tunnel. Behind them, the main shaft imploded with a roar, like thunder underground. They emerged from the ventilation shaft, 50 yards from the main entrance, tumbling out onto scorched hillside as the mine collapsed completely. Dust and debris exploded outward. They lay in a heap, gasping. Astrid screamed, the most beautiful sound, because it meant she lived. Madeleine clutched her daughter, sobbing with relief. Nashoba rose slowly despite his bruised back, checking everyone. Gray Otter had a cut above his eye. Burke's leg was shattered. Madeleine was bruised but whole. Astrid terrified but unharmed. The wildfire had burned out against the backfire line. Calder Briggs sat exhausted near the boundary, clothes charred but intact. He'd held the line alone. Dr. Whitfield arrived an hour later with a wagon drawn by Eliza's signal mirrors. He stabilized Burke's leg with splints and laudanum. Calder surrendered to the territorial marshal without resistance. Burke, delirious with pain, made full confession, railroad payments, Yates's involvement, Pike's unwitting role. His testimony would unravel the entire conspiracy. As the wagon rolled toward Crow's Landing, Madeleine sat with Astrid sleeping against her chest. Nashoba sat beside her, bruised and bloodied, but alive. Neither spoke. Words felt inadequate. Gray Otter drove glancing back at his uncle and the woman who'd become part of their family. He smiled slightly. The spirits worked mysteriously. The aftermath unfolded over following weeks with justice, healing, and reconstruction. Deputy Yates faced territorial trial for conspiracy, destruction of property, and kidnapping. Evidence was overwhelming. He was sentenced to 15 years hard labor. The railroad paid substantial fines and faced legal challenges for years. Burke Mallory lost his leg below the knee to gangrene despite Whitfield's efforts. He cooperated fully, his testimony crucial. In exchange, his sentence reduced to 5 years. Calder Briggs received 2 years for rustling with credit for holding the fire line. Judge Renfrow acknowledged that in sentencing. Harlan Pike withdrew from Thunder Valley entirely. Publicly humiliated, he sold his operation and relocated to Kansas. Before leaving, he had one final conversation with Madeleine at Crow's Landing Cemetery. "I wanted to hate you," Pike said quietly. "Blame you for destroying my family name. Easier than admitting Rowan was cruel. He was your son. You loved him." Madeleine's voice held no judgment. "That doesn't make what he did right. But it makes your grief real. The child, she's got Rowan's eyes. She's got her own eyes. She'll make her own choices." Pike nodded. "I won't contest custody. Won't interfere. But if she ever wants to know about her grandmother, my wife who died when Rowan was young, there are letters, photographs. I'll leave them with Judge Renfrow for when she's older." "Thank you." Pike tipped his hat and rode away forever. Neshoba's burns healed slowly but cleanly. Whitfield taught Madeleine proper care. She tended his wounds each evening with thoroughness beyond medical necessity. One night, wrapping fresh bandages, Neshoba caught her hand. "You don't have to keep doing this. Whitfield says they're healing." "I know, but I want to." She didn't pull away. Their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them. "When this started," Neshoba said quietly, "I told myself you were hired help. Practical arrangement. And now I can't imagine Thunder Valley without you." He traced rope scars on her palm. "You've got homesteader's hands, strong. So do you. Builder's hands, healer's hands." The moment stretched intimate. Gray Otter made a deliberate coughing sound without opening his eyes. Both adults pulled back, embarrassed but smiling. Thunder Valley's reconstruction began in April when ground thawed. The spring's collapse was extensive, 20 feet of rock burying the water source. But Neshoba predicted correctly, water still flowed underground. A work crew assembled Lakota men ranchers, some of Pike's former hands, needing employment. They worked in shifts, removing rubble, shoring unstable rock, redirecting water flow. 3 weeks of backbreaking labor. When water finally broke through, bubbling clear and cold, everyone cheered. Gray Otter fired his rifle in celebration. Madeleine wept with relief. Thunder Valley lived again. Rebuilding the camp took additional weeks. Neshoba constructed a hybrid dwelling, log walls with pitched roof, combining Lakota and settler architecture. Proper kitchen area with iron stove. Separate sleeping areas. Small nursery for Astrid. "You're building a house, not a camp," Eliza observed, helping hang curtains. "Feels right," Neshoba admitted. "Feels like home," Eliza said knowingly. Legal resolution came through Judge Renfrow's final ruling. With Pike's withdrawal and Burke's testimony, the custody case dissolved. Madeleine retained full legal custody with no ongoing claims. Furthermore, Minnesota authorities had reviewed evidence. The probate court ruled in Madeleine's favor. The farm and savings were legally hers, free from claims, about $2,000 total. "You're a woman of property," Eliza told her, showing documents. Madeleine looked at Thunder Valley rebuilt spring-growing house grazing horses. "I've found better property here." That evening, she and Neshoba sat outside, watching sunset paint canyon walls gold and crimson. Astrid dozed in Madeleine's lap. "The Minnesota money," Madeleine said carefully. "I was thinking of investing it here, buying breeding stock, expanding the horse operation, if you'd partner." Long silence. "Partnership means sharing profits, sharing decisions." "I know. Also sharing work, risks, winters when money's tight." "I've survived worse. We both have." "Yes." He squeezed her hand gently. "Partnership, then. Equal shares, equal say. Not a marriage proposal. But on the frontier where survival trumped romance, it was equally binding. A promise of shared futures built on proven trust." Gray Otter smiled without looking up from his book. His uncle had been alone too long. Dr. Whitfield visited monthly. On one visit, he brought Neshoba's medicine bundle survived the explosion intact, found in rubble. "Thought you might want this back," Whitfield said. Neshoba held the bundle, feeling familiar weight. He hadn't opened it in 3 years. Now he unwrapped the deerskin carefully. Inside were tools of his healing practice, carved bone awls, dried herbs, pipe stem with quillwork, eagle feathers, prayer stones. Everything he'd put away. "I'm not sure I can use these again," he admitted. "You already did. You saved that baby's life." Whitfield gestured to Astrid playing with wooden blocks. "The spirits didn't punish you. Grief punished you. Maybe it's time to forgive yourself." Neshoba rewrapped the bundle but hung it in the new house, visible, accessible, ready. Intimate moments between Neshoba and Madeleine accumulated from small gestures rather than grand romance. When she struggled lifting heavy buckets, he was there not taking them, but helping her balance weight so she could carry them herself. When he worked long hours and forgot to eat, she brought food, not nagging, just setting a plate within reach. When Astrid woke crying at night, both rose automatically to soothe her together, his deep voice and her soft lullabies blending. When supplies ran low and they shared the last dried meat, they split it exactly in half. These small acts spoke louder than poetry. They were the language of partnership translated into survival. One evening, Madeleine asked Neshoba to teach her Lakota words. He taught, slowly correcting pronunciation with patience. When she stumbled, he repeated close to her ear so she could hear nuances. His breath warmed her neck. She shivered, not from cold. "You're a better student than most," he said. "Most don't live in Thunder Valley. I want to understand this place. Your people. You." The air between them felt charged. Neshoba's hand rose, hesitating near her face. She leaned into the touch. His calloused palm cupped her cheek. She covered his hand with hers. They stayed that way, not kissing, not speaking, just acknowledging connection. Gray Otter cleared his throat loudly outside. "I'm checking horses. Might take a while." His footsteps faded deliberately. Both adults smiled. "He's trying to give us privacy," Madeleine said. "He's a good nephew." "Will he mind us? Whatever this is." "He already considers you family. Lakota families are built on loyalty and shared life, not just blood. You've proven both." "I want this," she whispered. "I want to stay. Build a life here. With you. I want that too. I want to wake knowing you're here. Want to teach Astrid to ride. Want to..." She kissed him before he could finish, rising on toes to bridge height difference. Brief, chaste, but filled with promise. When they broke apart, both breathed harder. Neshoba rested his forehead against hers. "This won't be easy. People will judge." "Let them talk. I'm done living by other people's rules." "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure." Late spring 1881 transformed Thunder Valley into something approaching paradise. Grass greened slopes. Wildflowers bloomed. The spring flowed strong feeding creek where trout jumped at twilight. The house stood complete solid logs and stone porch facing east for morning sun. Madeline's kitchen garden flourished near the creek. The horse corral expanded for new stock purchased with her Minnesota money. Gray Otter divided time between Thunder Valley and agency school, thriving under Eliza Hart's teaching. Dr. Whitfield visited regularly, bringing supplies. He and Neshoba collaborated on a medicinal plant guide combining Lakota herbal knowledge with Western medical terminology. Astrid grew rapidly, bright eyes full of intelligence. She babbled constantly, fascinated by horses, birds, and especially Gray Otter, who spoiled her shamelessly. She showed no lingering effects from pneumonia or mind trauma, resilient as prairie grass. One morning in May, unexpected visitor arrived. Judge Renfrow rode into Thunder Valley with Eliza Hart. His presence was unusual, but his expression was friendly. "Got paperwork to deliver," he announced, dismounting with arthritic grunt. "Important enough to bring personally." He handed Neshoba a thick envelope containing legal documents. The first was mineral rights assessment. Black Hills survey crew had discovered something while investigating Thunder Valley silver deposits in canyon walls. Small veins, not enough for industrial mining, but valuable. "You own those mineral rights," Renfrow explained. "The railroad tried claiming them, but their challenges collapsed when Yates was convicted. Rights default to the landowner, you, Neshoba. You're sitting on about $10,000 worth of silver conservatively." Neshoba stared, processing implications. $10,000 was substantial wealth. "There's more," Eliza said, pulling out second document. Minnesota probate closed. The farm sold for $2,400. Savings account held another $800. After fees and debts, you have just over $2,000 clear, Madeleine. Madeleine's hands shook, holding the bank draft. She'd fled with nothing. Now she had property savings security. And this, Renfrow handed over third document, is the interesting one. The territorial court recognized Neshoba's continuous occupancy and use rights in Thunder Valley, while Madeleine filed a lawful homestead claim on the adjoining parcel under the territorial registrar. Rather than any federal patent or fee simple deed from the Bureau of Indian Affairs in 1881, the court issued an order acknowledging customary occupancy and a limited lease and supply arrangement. Neshoba would breed and train remount horses for the district marshal and army post by contract, and the council recorded shared access to water under the local ditch bylaws. This legal compromise matched the practices of the time and gave them defensible standing without asserting a private patent over reservation land. Correspondence from Washington, D.C., Bureau of Indian Affairs. After reviewing the conspiracy case and noting Neshoba's cooperation, the Bureau granted him legal title to Thunder Valley. 320 acres with full ownership rights. "Most Lakota can't own land individually," Renfrow explained. "It's held in trust. But the Bureau made an exception, citing your service and assistance. You're a legal landowner now. Recognized." The magnitude stunned everyone. Land ownership gave Neshoba legal standing. He'd never had right to defend property in court, pass it to heirs billed without agency permission. "One condition," Renfrow added. "The Bureau wants you to establish licensed horse breeding operation. They need reliable stock. They're willing to contract for 5 years, guaranteed purchases, fair prices. Financial security for the foreseeable future. Not just survival, but prosperity." That evening, after visitors left, Neshoba and Madeleine sat on the porch watching sunset. Astrid dozed between them. "We could leave," Madeleine said quietly. "Take this money, sell the land, go somewhere easier. California, maybe. Somewhere people wouldn't judge." "Do you want to leave?" She looked at Thunder Valley, the home they'd built the spring they'd reclaimed. No, this place is ours. We fought for it. I want Astrid to grow up here knowing she's got roots. Then we stay. People will talk. White woman and Lakota man living together raising a child. Let them talk. We've survived worse than gossip. What do we call this arrangement? He considered carefully. In Lakota, there's no single word for marriage like whites use. We have ceremonies. But we also have partnerships built on choice and commitment. Two people deciding to share lives, work futures. That's what this is. Is it enough for you? More than enough. I've had enough of being alone, enough of grief eating me inside. You and Astrid, you've given me reasons to build instead of just survive. That's everything. She leaned into him, fitting against his side. I love you. I don't know when it started, maybe when you saved Astrid or held me during the ford, or maybe earlier. But I love you. Long silence, his throat tight. I love you too. Both of you. My family. They sat watching stars emerge in darkening sky. Gray Otter saw them together, smiled, and returned to his work. The boy had hoped for this. Final surprise came a week later, letter delivered by stagecoach from Harlan Pike in Kansas. Madeline opened it with trepidation. Pike had written in shaky handwriting, Miss Hogg, I've established a trust fund for Astrid. $500 at First Kansas Bank accessible when she reaches 16. It's what my wife, Catherine, would have wanted her grandmother caring, even from beyond death. I'm not asking for visitation. I made my choices. But the girl is blood, and blood deserves security. I've enclosed photographs of Catherine. If Astrid ever wants to know what decent looks like in the Pike family, show her these. Live well. Raise her strong. H. Pike. Inside were 3 photographs. Young woman in wedding dress. The same woman older, holding infant Rowan and family portrait, with Catherine Harlan and teenage Rowan. In the portrait, Catherine's eyes held the same clear quality as Astrid's. Madeline showed Neshoba. He examined photographs carefully. He's trying to do right in his way, Neshoba said. Doesn't erase what came before, but it's something. Should I accept the money? It's for Astrid, not us. When she's old enough, let her decide. Until then, let the bank hold it. They stored photographs and letter in a carved box with other documents, land deed, bank drafts, Rowan's confession. Someday, when Astrid was old enough, they'd give her the full story. As summer deepened, Thunder Valley bustled with life. Horse breeding operation flourished. Madeleine's garden provided vegetables she traded at Crow's Landing. Gray Otter continued education, showing promise as translator and negotiator. Astrid took first steps in the house, stumbling from Madeleine's arms to Neshoba's laughter, bright as bells. Both parents cheered, and even stern-faced Warrior couldn't hide his grin. Whitfield pronounced her completely healthy. Strong lungs, good weight, bright eyes. She'll be climbing canyon walls soon. That's what I'm afraid of, Madeline said fondly. Seasons turned. Autumn brought cooler temperatures and winter preparation work. Neshoba and Madeline worked side by side, their partnership seamless. One evening in October, as first snow dusted the canyon rim, Neshoba presented something he'd crafted in secret, a wedding vest of soft deerskin decorated with intricate beadwork in Norwegian colors, blue, red, white, combined with Lakota patterns. It's not white wedding, he explained, but in Lakota tradition, this symbolizes commitment. If you wear it, you're telling the world you've chosen me, that we're bound. Madeline took the vest with trembling hands, tracing beadwork. The craftsmanship was exquisite. It's beautiful. Will you wear it? She put it on. It fit perfectly. She turned to him. Does this make us married? By Lakota custom, yes. By white law, no. But we can arrange legal ceremony if you want. Do you want that? He pulled her close, foreheads touching. I want whatever makes you feel secure. Lakota marriage is enough for me based on choice and commitment renewed each day we stay together. But if you need white law's recognition, I'll do that too. Choice and commitment. I like that better than oaths said once and forgotten. Let's do it your way. I choose you, Nashoba, every day. And I choose you, both of you. They sealed commitment with a kiss longer and deeper than before, filled with promise and heat. Gray Otter appeared, cleared his throat, grinned. I'm sleeping in the barn tonight. Congratulations, Uncle. Aunt. He disappeared, leaving them alone. That night marked true beginning of their marriage, not with ceremony, but with choice and intimacy, building something permanent. Months later, winter 1882, Madeline discovered she was pregnant. Joy and terror memories of difficult infancy, fears of complications, worries about childbirth, far from help. But Nashoba was there steady. Whitfield will help. I'll help. You're strong. And this child is wanted, loved already. That matters. She placed his hand on her belly. You're not afraid? Terrified. But fear doesn't stop life. We'll face this like everything else together. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Whitfield monitored monthly. Eliza brought supplies. Gray Otter built a larger cradle. Late summer 1882. Madeline gave birth to a son. Labor was long and difficult. But Nashoba stayed throughout, supporting her, guiding, breathing, refusing to leave. When the baby came crying lustily, Whitfield handed him to Nashoba. The warrior held his son with shaking hands, tears streaming unashamedly. I didn't think I'd get this again, he whispered. Another chance. You've been Astrid's father. Madeline reminded him, exhausted but smiling. Now you get to do it twice. They named him Samuel Nashoba Hogg, combining both heritages, acknowledging both pasts. Astrid now too was fascinated by her brother. She insisted on helping with everything, bringing blankets, singing off-key lullabies, patting his head with sticky hands. Her clear eyes shone with protective affection. Thunder Valley had become what its name suggested, a place of power and life, where storms passed, but foundation remained strong. Years later, when Samuel was old enough to understand and Astrid old enough to remember, Nashoba and Madeline would tell them the full story. How grief and desperation brought two broken people together. How survival forged them into partners, and how choice made daily, consciously built family from ashes of loss. They would show the children the carved box containing photographs, letters, documents, evidence of where they'd come from and who they'd become. They would teach both languages, both customs, preparing them for a changing world demanding they navigate between cultures. They would raise them in Thunder Valley, surrounded by canyon walls and clean water horses and gardens, teaching them home is built through work and protected through courage. And on quiet evenings when children slept and stars filled enormous sky, Nashoba and Madeline would sit on their porch, no longer temporary shelter, but solid home, built to last and remember the winter they'd found each other. The widow who'd fled violence, and the warrior who'd fled grief. The baby with clear eyes who'd awakened something buried deep. The valley that had tested them, nearly destroyed them, and ultimately saved them. They'd built something permanent from temporary shelter, something whole from broken pieces. And when morning came, they'd rise together to face whatever challenges the frontier offered, knowing they were stronger together than they'd ever been alone.